So, with a resounding 82% of the vote, given how small my audience and reach is, but still, 82% of the people who voted said they liked the idea of a month where the top 10 most picked Pokemon were banned, and that it sounded like a fun idea. But how would it look? What are the ramifications, and what effect would it have if it were to come to pass? Well, let's find out.
Is there more to us than the words we say, the games we play? Can we know that we're not dreaming?
Alright, before I begin, this is all opinion-based and speculated. Don't judge me and say stuff like, well, this is obviously how it would go instead. I know. I am not a professional player like Wolf Click. I have, one win to my name with the very few local tournaments I've ever gone to, so yeah, take what I say in this video with a grain of sand and a bit of lighthearted fun. I didn't know Roaring Moon sat down. Oh, never mind. But, with all that said, just picture it. A month of VGC where the top 10 Pokemon are gone. Poof. Out of existence for one blessed month. Is it an official format? Maybe yes, maybe no. But just picture the sight. Just picture it. You don't see Flutter Mane on every other team. You don't see Urshifu just going Terra Water and Surging Strikes through your entire team. You don't see Iron Hands and Heatran just tanking every single hit you throw at it. You don't see Tornadus constantly setting up tailwinds every single match. You don't see Landorus Therian constantly trying to set up Intimidates, and you don't see Rillaboom always going Fake Out and Grassy Glide every match. And with Water and Fire Ogerpon banned, you might see Cornerstone Ogerpon a little bit more often now. For some of us, if not then more of us, this would be a slice of opportunity to experiment, as now people can run new Pokemon that they otherwise cannot because of just how consistently powerful other Pokemon are. Specifically, the same Legends and Paradox Mons that have and continue to dominate the top slots in every regional. Seriously, even in the twilight days of Regulation E, the top 12 have roughly not changed since Regulation B, with the only changes being popular picks being swapped out for the Legends. Seriously, ever since Regulation B was introduced, Flutter Mane has consistently kept a 40% pick rate, if not going higher. And since Regulation C, Chien Pao has not left that select group either. When Regulation D was brought in, Urshifu, Rillaboom, Landorus Therian, Heatran, and Hisuian Arcanine have consistently stayed up there as well. Even with all the returning Pokemon and new legendary Pokemon from Kitakami, only Ogerpon gave Kitakami any consistent spotlight when it comes to the pick rates, and it's only been Water or Fire keeping that spotlight. Yes, we see the occasional Blood Moon Ursaluna or even regular Ursaluna, the Sinistra, the random Regieleki, the potential hero for those looking to see a winning Pokemon take a regional, besides the constant sight of Rillaboom faking out Landorus Therian, Urshifu going Surging Strikes and Terra Water, Flutter Mane going Terra Fairy and spamming Moonblast, Heatran going Terra Fairy and absorbing Heat Waves, but even Pokemon like Amoonguss, a Pokemon that always was there since Regulation A, is making a resurgence now. And for some people, they don't like seeing these same Pokemon not only take regional after regional, but also dominate the ladder. Especially since many people on the ladder will run the rental teams of these super successful Pokemon teams, or just their own variations of them. And yes, while I know there is and will be a meta where eventually the best Pokemon will be narrowed down quickly to a select few, but this is where that what if scenario I mentioned comes to pass. And we don't have to pretend it isn't possible. Game Freak and Nintendo have done this before. back in Sword and Shield, we had a regulation where the top 10 most picked Pokemon were banned from VGC, both doubles and singles. And it only lasted a month, but it was still a refreshing take on the VGC format that forced people to think outside of the box for their teams. Was it serious? No. But, it still happened. But let's get into the meat of this idea. What would happen if we did ban the top 10 Pokemon? Well, as mentioned, these are the top 10 picked Pokemon on the VGC doubles ladder. I can't attest for singles because they do things vastly differently, so we'll only focus on the doubles and pretend that this is the format doubles players will use, whereas singles players will run their own. Without Urshifu, Rillaboom, Qianpao, and Landorus Therian, people no longer have to see their teams dying, with having no choice but to run Intimidate Pokemon or these Pokemon to hope to survive against such onslaughts. This gives Pokemon like Milotic a chance to appear. Pokemon who like to use barriers like Grimmsnarl and Alolan Ninetales a chance to play. It gives slower Pokemon like Abomasnow a moment to shine, as they don't have to fear dying unless they Terra. With Flutter Mane and Tornadus gone, you remove two of the biggest forms of speed and power currently in the meta, allowing Mons the ability to finally outspeed and do something. Yes, while Chi-Yu is still on the table, what makes Chi-Yu so strong is the fact that it plays with Flutter Mane almost all the time, due to the combination of being both special attackers with Chi-Yu's ability to reduce the special defense. Without that super fast Pokemon in the mix, Iron Bundle can take the reins as the fast special attacker, as can Regieleki, since without the typical Lando T and Rillaboom running around, its electric attacks have more viable targets now, and Chi-Yu can finally come out of its fishbowl since, well, there's no Urshifu water consistently choice scarfing it into a pulp. I'm still not fixing this monument, by the way. With the absence of bulky Pokemon like Heatran and Iron Hands always taking up the slot for safe switch-in Mons that can do everything, Pokemon like Ting-Lu can finally come back for reliable tanks, or even old favorites like Hisui and Goodra, or heck, even Galarian Moltres. Pokemon that can take hits and still find utility and damage. Remember Zapdos and how it was a popular pick in previous games? I haven't seen that bird since Galar, and I was expecting to see it on the ladder a few times. With Iron Hands, Lando T, Urshifu, and Heatran gone, it might have a chance to shine, even if for one single month. And while we all adore Ogerpon, and even though I use the Wellspring mask form, even I would have to admit I'd like to see more Teal Mask or even Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. And since the constant weather war isn't always going to be decided by prankster Tornadus, Sandstorm teams can make a resurgence since the biggest threats, Urshifu Water, Rillaboom, and Tornadus, are finally gone just for 1 month. Remember when Tyranitar was everywhere with Lycanroc? Imagine how strong that combo would be with a 100% accurate, 100 base power rock move that has a high chance to crit. Speaking of Tornadus, without that legend constantly avoiding fakeouts with Covert Cloak to always go for Tailwind and set up rain damages or spam taunts, other Tailwind setters can find a spotlight. Murkrow and Talonflame are good Tailwind setters that have just as much viable utility with taunts and even other options like Will-O-Wisp or Haze, but are sadly overshadowed because, of course, Tornadus exists. Now, they can finally get off the bench and line up for their team's Tailwind setters, and without Tornadus constantly spamming priority taunt, Dusclops can finally do something, since the biggest counter it is gone. And all it has to fear now are knockoff Roaring Moons. Of course, without a lot of these popular Pokemon present, some Pokemon might become absurdly dominant. We all loathe seeing the mushroom each generation, and without the typical threats it has to fear, seeing that they are now gone, it will basically rise to be the de facto rage powder, spore spamming menace it has always been. But, you know, with how many seasons we've been dealing with it already, I don't think anyone really bat an eye, and it just means we all know one Pokemon that we'll have to have an answer for regardless. This also means Trick Room teams can see a rise in usage, and that also means we'll need to consider always having a Trick Room counter in some way. But honestly, isn't that another reason why people always run Iron Hands and Heatran to begin with? I asked a more well-versed Pokemon battler, Professor Ragna, for his opinion on this idea, and he says that while it isn't in-depth, it would be an interesting twist in the format, as people can play without the fear of having to fight these ultra-powerful use them or you lose to them Pokemon. And while it may not be an official VGC format, as it's not as super serious as rules used in regionals, it would still be liked more than disliked. As for what mons, he knows that certain mons will rise up, like Amoonguss, but he also agrees that past regulation mons that had moments to shine, but were outshined because of these mega top tier picks, like Alolan Ninetales for one, and even Pokemon that haven't even had a chance to shine, like Monkey Dory and Okidogi. Pokemon that just can't compete with the meta despite their strengths will have a moment in the spotlight, however brief it is. I will say this before I end the video. Do the meta Pokemon check each other? Yes, but that's because nothing else can check them as effectively without being checked themselves. Who checks Lando T and its Intimidate, Urshifu Rapid Strike? Who checks Urshifu, Flutter Mane, and Rillaboom? Who check them? Heatran. Who checks Heatran? Iron Hands and Landorus Therian. Who checks Iron Hands? Flutter Mane. Who also checks Flutter Mane? Heatran, Urshifu, and Rillaboom. Who checks these Pokemon? Ogerpon. But who checks Ogerpon Fire? Urshifu. And who else checks Urshifu? Water Ogerpon. Who checks Water Ogerpon? Landorus Therian. See what I mean? Can you list a Pokemon, any Pokemon, that checks any of these Pokemon not already on the list, that isn't also checked by these Pokemon? But, you know, this is just all my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and in such a banned top 10 format, we'd see another selection of Pokemon who you would see everywhere. Maybe you have other ideas, but let's just pretend the top 10 were banned for a month. How would you react? Would you enjoy or hate it? Who would you pick for a team you'd run? Tell me down below in the comment section, and hey, if you liked the video, maybe consider liking it or even subscribing to the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye!
When you've reached the point where you can't go on, just come to me, you'll be safe from harm. If you trust in me, then I'll trust in you. There's nothing more that I need to do. If you put your hands in front of mine, we'll be shining through one at a time. Just understand you're not